This is a piece of videotape which records images by electronic impulses. And due to this tape, our children, our children's children, will be privileged to go to the John F. Kennedy Memorial Library at Harvard University and witness the life and times, the presidential record of John Kennedy. Just think how history will be enriched by all this. Think of what you and I would give to have seen Thomas Jefferson inaugurated, Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, or Teddy Roosevelt leading the charge of San Juan Hill. Well, our children and theirs will have the most complete and accurate record history has ever given up to now of a president. I feel deeply honored tonight to share some of that lifetime with you and to discuss it with a man whose own life reminds us of what brother really means, the distinguished Attorney General of the United States, Mr. Robert Kennedy. Great honor to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, wait till the folks just sit down quietly for a moment, and then we're just going to talk about, I know the thing closest to your heart at this very moment is the Memorial Library. And may I just ask some personal questions about how is Mrs. Kennedy, Mrs. John Kennedy?
She's fine, really, making a adjustment and doing it well. She spends most all of her time with her children now, and I think she's making a good deal of progress.
Is it true that you're over there to see the children a great deal, and Senator Ted is Ted Kennedy goes there at night and reads them comic books?
No. He has
Is that comic book?
No. He goes over and tells stories at night after he finishes work, and tells the two children, and then Dave Powers, who worked for my brother at the White House and was a great friend for many, many years, goes over and at lunchtime and has lunch with John. So they see some men in their lives now.
I see. Mrs. Kennedy, Mrs. John Kennedy is very interested, of course, in this memorial library, as you are, as I am, and I'd like to talk about that. It will be at Harvard. The late president picked out the ground, did he not?
Yes, he did.
By the Charles Cross?
Yes. Well, he had always been interested in having a library. Was really the thing that he was most interested in. It was a question where he'd put it, and he one time thought putting it where we live in Cape Cod, and then he finally decided that it would be more accessible to people all over the country, and particularly students, if it was placed in Boston. So he went up in the fall, I think September, October of 1963, and he picked out the location himself. And it was understood, of course, at that time that all the records while he was president would be placed there. Now we've changed the concept somewhat. It's just 3 years, but those records will go there, and then his earlier life, and then really going back into politics and the history of Massachusetts. And then the campaigns around the country. There's going to be a good deal of emphasis on political life in the United States to try to emphasize that for young people, that it's not a bad profession, that it's not a second-rate profession, and that in order to make really government in the country better, that people have to take an interest in politics and participate in one form or another. It's going to be really dedicated to that, and really on a nonpartisan basis, just on the ideals that President Kennedy stood for. And
what do you think, sir, was your brother's greatest contribution?
Well, I think really he made Americans feel young again.
Yes.
And I think that he gave all of us more confidence in the country, more confidence in the struggles that we're involved in internally and externally will be successful, more confidence in our efforts with those who are opposed to us. I think also he gave great confidence in people who lived in other countries, great confidence in the United States and in its leadership, and that we were dedicated to certain principles and ideals, and that we would live up to them and, if necessary, fight for them. And so that I think it changed over a period of years, our own feelings as well as the feelings of other peoples around the world.
Yeah. In a very moving forward to your brother's book, Profiles in Courage, you wrote that there was hardly a day of his more adult life where he wasn't in great pain.
Well, really, half of his life.
Half of his life.
Just that he was very sick when he was young, when he had diphtheria, and my father at that time said that if he lived, he would give half of everything he had to away, and my brother lived, and he did that. Then I think it was enough to buy a bus for school at that time.
Oh.
And then he had many other kinds of problems as he was growing up. And then when he went in politics, of course, in the 58 campaign, he had to campaign with crutches, and then a good part of 59 and 60. And then even after he became president. But my point really was not the fact that he had pain, but he really never complained about it.
He didn't?
No, I never heard him complain. As I said in that, you could just tell, if you knew him well, by the fact that his face was whiter and the lines around his eyes were a little different, and he might be a little sharper.
A little sharper.
But he never felt that God had treated him unjustly.
There are some wonderful stories, and I asked Mrs. Kennedy, your Ethel, whether they were true, because you can't tell once you read what's true and what's made up. It so happens that these stories were all true. The story about when you went in one day and the newspapers had said that you were the number 2 man in the country, and the president looked at this newspaper and said, "So, Robert," he called you Bobby, didn't he? What did he call you,
yes,
Bobby?
Bobby.
He says, "Bobby, yeah." He said, "Bobby, so you're the number 2 man in the country, huh?" And Robert didn't want to discuss it at all. He said, "So you're the number 2 man?" He says, "Well, Bobby, now there's only one way for you to go." Down. And then the library will contain lots of, light moments that the late president shared with his family. For instance, when he was still in the South Pacific, Lieutenant Kennedy, and after the PT-109 incident, young Robert then was trying to get in the Navy and got in the Navy, and there was a picture made. Is it true in the newspaper? And it was sent to your brother.
My father sent it to him, and then he found that...
Tell me what it said.
He wrote me a letter then, and found that he examined the picture closely and found I had his clothes on. So he said he didn't mind doing his bit for his country, but he protested slightly about me wearing his clothes.
It was an overcoat, wasn't it?
But all of those kinds, not just the records from the time that he was president and Senate, but all of the records, letters that he wrote while he was younger, and then all of those who are associated with him in politics and government are going to be interviewed, or in the process of being interviewed now, extensively. And plus those people overseas, so that, and all of those tapes will be made available, will be turned over to the library. Some of them, of course, won't be open for 10, 15, 25 years, maybe some for 100 years. But at least all of that material, those who were in favor of President Kennedy, those who were opposed to him, will all be there, so that not just scholars, but all the young people who are interested in their country and interested in history can come later on and push a button and listen to a tape of Adenauer, Willy Brandt, Robert McNamara, or even President Kennedy himself, and know about the history of the times.
Mr. Attorney General, this is the famous coconut shell that is embedded in plastic that sat on your brother's desk for these years. This is the coconut that he wrote when he was in the PT-109 crash, when the Amagiri cut the boat in two. And after 8 days, he finally was able to carve one a coconut and give it to a little native boy. I think his name was Ironi or Biyuku, as I remember. I met him on the Pacific. And he carried this, or started to carry it down to Rendova, to the base, to let them know that the 10 boys, were alive on the PT-109. And so, this is embedded in plastic, and this is, I think, one of the most famous individual pieces in America. Everyone knows the coconut from the president's desk. And then they're going to make an exact duplicate of the president's office in the library. And this, Mr. Attorney General, would you explain this picture, because it's...
Well, while my brother took the trip to Texas, his wife redecorated his office, and which was to be a surprise to him when he returned on November 24th. And this picture was taken on November 23rd, so that he never saw the office like it is here. She changed while he was away.
The drapes and carpet.
Changed the drapes and the carpet.
And can you imagine the value of this that I hold in my hand, this simple little legal paper, which is the first, is it the first draft of the inaugural draft? An early draft.
Well, yes. Actually, it's got the date on it, but on January 17th. But it's of 1961. It's a draft of the inaugural address in his handwriting, 2 pages of it. But all of the records and documents that he made during that period of time were saved.
Here's an autograph, apparently, from the Vienna meeting with Mr. Khrushchev. Is that right?
Yes. I might say that Jackie got some more autographs for Mr. Khrushchev at that time, and then, unfortunately, left them on the dining room table.
Oh, goodness gracious. It was a great story I read the other day about the president at that meeting with Mr. Khrushchev. The Russians, when I was in Moscow, I noticed they're great to wear medals. Even the Russian children wear little medals. Always. All the kids wear medals. I don't know, the little things. And Mr. Khrushchev had this on, and the president said, "Mr. Chairman, what is that?" And Mr. Khrushchev said, "It is the Lenin Peace Prize." And the president said, "Let's hope you keep it." Few lines here, Mr. Kennedy, if I may just... Oh, during one of the president's trips to the West Coast, a little kid ran up to him and said, "Mr. President, how did you become a hero?" And the president said, "It was absolutely involuntary. They sank my boat." Mr. Kennedy was asked if he had any unusual dreams the first night that he slept in Lincoln's bed. And the president said, "Nope, I just jumped in and held on." But this is my favorite line. This is a classic line that I think shall live. This was at the occasion, perhaps you were there, at the White House dinner for 173 distinguished people and the Nobel Prize winners. And your brother said, "I think this is the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge, that has ever been gathered together at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone." That's a marvelous line. Tell me about this.
At the time of the missile crisis in Cuba, there were a number of us who were involved in the discussions and trying to determine what recommendation to make to the president. After those discussions were finished, and after Mr. Khrushchev announced the withdrawal of the missiles from Cuba, the president gave those of us who had participated in that a calendar with our initials on the right and his initials, JFK, on the left, and then the calendar with the dates specially marked from the 16th of October to the 28th of October, Sunday morning, when Mr. Khrushchev announced the withdrawal of the missiles from Cuba.
What do you think was in his mind? Can you describe him at that time? This was perhaps the most serious moment in our history since Pearl Harbor. Perhaps it was more serious in Pearl Harbor.
Well, I think really because rested in his hands, and I suppose Mr. Khrushchev, as to whether mankind was going to be destroyed.
Over a weekend there almost.
So I think you can go through making speeches and you can go through the campaigns as all of us did, but I think it really, perhaps the Berlin crisis 61, but this more than any other time brought home to you the importance of the presidency of the United States, the importance of what this country means, the importance the determinations that are going to be made by this country. Because it's not just determining whether you're going to die, or perhaps even your children are going to die, your friends, but it means just almost the destruction of mankind. It means the destruction of children who had nothing to do with it, who have never been given the opportunity to vote, or vote aye or nay, or participate in any way. And so responsibility is so overwhelming that it's almost incomprehensible. I think, of course, that's during those 14 days. He thought of that, he thought of, as he said, it didn't matter so much for those of us who had had some part of life, but he was making a determination and a judgment and a decision which was going to affect all of these children who really didn't have anything to do with it. And then when Major Anderson was killed...
Tell me about him. I know a little bit.
He was a U-2 pilot, and really it was the great bravery and dedication of the pilots during this period of time who flew over Cuba day after day and took these pictures. It was their patriotism, dedication to their country, which made it possible for us to have the knowledge in which to proceed. But when Major Anderson was killed in South Carolina, the president said that that's really the way wars are. It's just the best men that get killed.
You were telling me how many pictures were made. How much did it amount to on that? Do you recall?
Well, one time we had to examine those who were looking for the missiles. Had to examine. I remember one time the film was 120 miles long and 35 miles wide.
Just on U-2 flights over this?
Just to examine, to determine whether there's anything going on.
Did the president enjoy press conferences as much as he seemed to?
Yes.
I sure enjoyed watching those. I just wouldn't miss a press conference.
Yes.
He had a twinkle in his eye. He loved the challenge, didn't he?
He did.
He did. He really liked it.
And of course, all of those will go to the library. And then,
I know. The networks are donating.
And then this network is donating, I think, 500,000 feet of that film.
Every press conference.
All the press conferences. And then we're going to have booths set up in the library so that you can go in and press a button and listen to it.
That will be a marvelous thing for the children to know and see the president.